Lonesome Lands Podcast, Lonesome Report. I'm Jim Mundorf, Shad Sullivan. Today is the 3rd, February 3rd, Tuesday, February 3rd, 8:28 a.m. We're doing an early one.
It's early.
Um, what are we going to talk about today, Shad? The big
The
cattle con.
Yeah, cattle con's happening. That's a newsworthy event.
Lab meat. They were trying to, I've testified once. I'm going to testify again to get lab meat banned in South Dakota.
Okay.
ADM's deal where they were fined $40 million, which they can probably find in their couch cushions. Um,
Neville Spear, he's back on the anti-M cool
yeah,
train.
yeah.
So
The
writing
the
articles.
the anti-cattlemen's lobbyist group. This
Okay.
episode is brought to you by Potter Cattle, which is a family that is I've known for as long as I can remember. And so there's two old families in the Griswold, Iowa neighborhood, and one of them's a Mundorf family and one of them's a Potter family. But Brent and Max Potter have sold bulls for a long time, and they have a bull sale coming February 14th. Let me bring it back up here.
Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah. Can you imagine anything more romantic to do with your sweetheart than go to I had their dang catalog right up here. Okay. Then go
It's
to a
right up
bull
my
sale?
alley. It's right up my alley.
What's that?
Going to a bull sale on
On
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. Yeah. Is it up Thea's alley?
Likely not.
Well, you can here you're a little ways away, so what you could do is light some candles, get the bull sale up on the big screen. You have John Shaben, the sweet sounds of John Shaben's auction chants to
Yeah.
set the mood. And there you go. DV auction. The bull sale is going to be on DV auction. The location is Griswold, Iowa Community Building. If you want to see the cattle, they're right outside of town there in Griswold. It's at 1 o'clock. The Potter cattle, they've been doing this. He said he's been selling bulls for 20 years. They've had their own sale for 11 years now, and so they've done it a long time and have really figured it out. It's Simmental, Angus Simmental crosses, kind of the best of both worlds if you're interested in the Simmentals and Anguses. Pretty much everything I think comes from like they're doing the embryo transfers now and the AIs, and they work hard to get the exact kind of genetics that they want. I will put their catalog and all their info in the description there, where you can see all the EPDs and all the great numbers that they have. They're going to have some heifers on there also. And you get talking to these bull guys, and they get in all in the EPDs and bloodlines and all that thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the one thing that kind of caught my attention is like, it's great when your customers are calling you and they're in a good mood, right? Because telling you they have the heaviest calves they've sold at that time of year, and that prices are the best prices they've ever had. So this is the time you want to make sure you have those good genetics in your
Hmm.
cattle. So Potter cattle.
Yeah,
Go
that's
look for
cool.
the link in description. February 14th. Take your sweetheart to the bull sale. Or if you're all the way down in Texas, light some candles, set the mood, put it on DV auction, buy yourself a bull. What better present? Also, not just a thing to do, but what better present could you buy for your sweetheart?
Yeah, I
And
appreciate that. I
new
appreciate
sire.
that sponsorship, but I'll tell you this, these bull prices are on fire.
Yeah.
Man, I'm watching the averages across the nation. That's massive, massive averages on these bulls. So good luck to them. I'm sure they'll bring a ton of money. We hope they do.
Yeah. Well, it's like, people are figuring it out. If there's a time to have, good genetics that all goes into the calving, everything, making everything easy, making sure everything goes smooth. That's what you got to pay attention to what you're doing. So, and have
Plus,
it
it's a lifetime of work being rewarded finally, and that's pretty awesome.
finally.
Finally.
All right. So the big, I guess this news in the cattle industry this week is the big convention in Nashville, Cattle Con in Nashville. We will not be attending because it is, for those not familiar, it's the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the lobbyist group for the corporate agriculture world, corporate cattle world.
Hmm.
Um, One thing that I found interesting Claire Dunn had a great video. Shad's friend from Eastern Colorado, right? Right, Shad?
Right. Yeah.
I don't have you up here,
She's a
but
country music star.
yeah. So she's in Nashville. She had a
Yep.
great video, and then she attended CattleCon where she
Yeah.
had a great video exposing the truth about the checkoff, talking about what a scam the beef checkoff is, how your money gets given to these lobbyist groups and controlled. And then later that day, and she was scheduled to be, was she performing there?
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
She's
Oh, she's
performing tomorrow
performing
there.
tomorrow at
Yeah.
CattleCon.
Yeah.
So there are truth tellers down there. You
Oh
can
yeah.
find them. And
Yeah,
that's and
she
hats
needs
off to
to.
her for, she knows she was going into the line, she knew what she was doing, right? And when she put that out, she put it out the week of
Yeah.
CattleCon. Yeah. And so, but I guess I don't know. I looked it up and it said she was presented by the Molly Manufacturing. So, I don't know if she's getting, if NCBA is wanting her down there or if it's one of their sponsors. Do you
Yeah.
know?
I think they have a booth down there, but I don't really know. She's a super good singer, and she walks the walk and talks the talk, because I know that she went to Nashville and was well on her way to becoming a superstar. And I think the global corporate greed in Nashville kind of got to her, and she said, I don't have to do this. I can represent myself. And so I think she maintains a residence in Nashville and in Southeast Colorado. And, her mom and dad are just farmers and ranchers. They're just good, wholesome people. And she is really a superstar. She can sing, man. She's very straightforward. You don't have to know what's on her mind. And in the words of Claire Dunn, I ain't scared. So good for her.
Chad, I can hear you, but I can't, you're locked up. Oh, there you go. All right.
Why
You
am
just
I locked up?
unlocked. Maybe you just had to quit talking for a second. Then your video. Are you stuck again?
No?
Yeah, you are. I don't know what's
Am
going
I?
on. Well, there you unstuck.
Oh
Is
my
she
goodness.
she's from kind of close by where you grew up, right?
Well, probably 120 miles southeast. I think Springfield Walsh area. She's down in there,
Well, that's close.
very far southeast corner, almost into Oklahoma, in the Oklahoma Panhandle, southwest Kansas. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's a TikToker I mean, she's
Uh-huh.
like got gained a lot of traction and gotten a lot
Mhm.
of good messages out through TikTok about kind of the corporate greed and
Yes.
corruption in the agriculture world.
Knows how to communicate that stuff across very, very well. She does it concisely and organized, and so she does a good job. And I'm glad she's telling the truth, because we need more of them.
Is she like did you know about her as a singer first or as
Yes.
like a you
As a
did?
sing, I didn't, I've never, she's so much younger than me that I don't know her, but I knew her as a singer first, and then she kind of um, got into the fight because of all these property rights issues that are affecting people near her family operation, maybe even her families. For example, the national grasslands issue on their reorganization of their rules on these people, production rules on these people who lease national grasslands in southeast Colorado. She did a great video on that, but she started right after COVID with these videos. She's learning a lot in a hurry. She's super smart.
Yeah. And so you knew her as like you've heard
A
about
singer.
this local gal that was up and
Mhm.
coming country singer, and then all of a sudden she kind of started
Yeah.
hitting the agriculture industry news kind of
Yeah.
stuff with TikTok.
Yeah. And I think she's staying busy, going all over the nation singing. She does a great job. And she says, I'll sing for anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
What she
Well,
told me.
she's getting the word out on. I mean, these
Yeah,
young kids
she's
these days and their TikToks, and then you see how many views and likes and all that stuff they
Mhm.
got. It's like, good grief.
Yeah, well, she's in the fire this week, so good for her.
Yeah, good for her. But it goes to show too, there are good people that go to that convention. I don't know why, but it's pretty disappointing to me. But when we talk
Well,
about the NCBA and everything, we do realize they're members. A lot of them, they don't, for us, we're so in the weeds with all these issues. And for a lot of people, they're out doing chores and they've Grandpa was an NCBA member, and that's just kind of what they've always done. And so what we're working to do is to, get people a little more informed and understanding where that money goes. That they're sending to this. And that's the other thing. You have to spend thousands of dollars to go to
Oh
this
my gosh, it
convention.
is.
I think
I
it's like
mean,
$500 to go to the trade show.
750. It was a lot. I can't believe how expensive it is. But there are a lot of good. There's the trade show, I think, is super, super good. I know a
I'm not
couple.
saying one good thing about that.
Well, listen, I know a couple of people that went just for the trade show because they said the
Yeah.
trade show is really, really outstanding.
But
And I'm
that's the
sure it is.
unfortunate part is we don't know how much checkoff dollars go to this. And on all the pages, it says you'll have your little beef checkoff thing. And there was one year, I think because we called them out so much, that they quit. The checkoffs would sponsor the trade show.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, we got this great thing, but it's not an NCBA thing. It's actual cattle guys have to pay for that,
Yep.
and it's just such a scam. But if you're looking through the schedule here, and you want to know, how they put on this big convention and how this whole thing works, we have, your first day DC meetings, DC issues update, sponsored by JBS USA. And so and a while back they made a whole big deal about JBS was no longer NCBA member.
Yep. They
Remember
sure
that?
did. Yes, I do.
So are they still not a member? They just sponsor their
Apparently,
convention because that
apparently they
doesn't.
have JBS has pulled out of their sponsor of their membership at NCBA, but they are sponsoring the trade show.
Well,
So
who's to say they aren't a member again and didn't just? I mean, NCABA is not going to brag about that,
I have
right?
no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
right. But you can just go through these list of sponsors. Of course, Certified Angus Beef is sponsoring something. Um, And then one thing I've talked about before, this Environmental Stewardship Award,
Hmm.
sponsored by the USDA, NRCS, Corteva,
Mm.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service,
Hmm.
Cargill, and Sam's Club.
Sam's Club.
Hey, they got a new one in there.
Really?
Yeah. I wonder how much an ad salesperson like that gets all those ads sold would cost, because that's what we need around here. Oh, thanks to John Campbell, by the way. Speaking of how we don't make any
Heck
money,
yeah.
John Campbell gave us a great shout out. He's Shad's old buddy, I guess, right?
Yeah, I've known John Campbell my whole life. He came to Winter Livestock in La Junta, Colorado, back when a guy by the name of Jerry Keffler was running the show there, and I remember Jerry Keffler was a hell of an auctioneer, and he when he'd point, he had these crooked fingers. Of course, Jerry was old when I was little, but his hands, were an old man's hands, and he could sure auction, and then. Um, uh, who we talking who we talking
John
about? John
Campbell.
Campbell. John Campbell came in as a young man. He's been there ever since. And listen, John Campbell is a good guy, and you don't ever have to know what's on John Campbell's mind. He is aggressive. These are the kinds of people I like. That's why I like Trump, right? John says it how it is. He's aggressive, and he is very community minded. And he did give us this fantastic shout out on Cattle USA podcast, and I couldn't appreciate him more for that. Wow, what a great shout out. But then on the other side of that, we had Ethan Lane decide to give us a great shout out at American National Cattle Women meeting there at CattleCon, and apparently it wasn't so nice. So we had both ends of the spectrum today
Yeah,
or
but
this week, but
you
it
know
was
which
it
one
was
means
great.
more, and it ain't Ethan Lane. You got your DC lobbyist doesn't like you, but I would much rather have the Colorado auctioneer guy sing our praises than a DC lobby guy.
Yeah,
That's who we
John.
want to not like us.
Well, John Campbell's a good guy, and I appreciate that shout out. That was a big deal for me. And I told him, I said, that's one of the highlights of my life right there. I've had a great life, man, but that
Yeah,
was a highlight.
yeah. He didn't. He really later on.
Although he was
Um,
texting me at 3:30 or 4 in the morning, which is fine.
Auctioneer hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. And does he have his own Facebook or whatever to follow him, or is it just Winter
Mhm.
Livestock?
Well, both Winter Livestock. He doesn't have a Facebook page, but his wife
Okay.
does, Valerie Campbell, and she shares some of that stuff. But
All right.
Yeah, you don't have to know where John stands ever.
Yeah. Well, big thank you to him. Um, and also Cattle USA for putting that out
Yeah,
there. I know that,
absolutely.
some people can look at things as competing, but yeah, it's good information. Good information is good information.
Yeah, and that young lady does a good job.
Yeah.
She's very, very consistent with her podcast there.
Right. And that's the thing about these auctioneers. People watch us, especially me. I get to stumbling around and and we get these comments like you say too much
You
or
hem haw too much.
yeah, or you'd say right. Somebody was mad because Shad says right a lot, and I say all the time. But like these auctioneers are such good communicators, spend their whole life communicating quickly and to the point and all that,
Right?
and then somebody has to watch us after watching somebody like John Campbell. It's like these guys can't
Well,
even
we
spit
still
their
appreciate
words
them
out,
watching.
right? I know, but I'm just comparing. Like, I'm giving an excuse of why we're not as good as somebody like him, where he can just sit down in his truck and go off. I wish we had the
Oh man.
one-liners too,
Yeah,
That guy.
absolutely.
Anyway, we got into this. We got down that rabbit hole by talking about all the sponsors that we don't have,
Right.
which is the Environmental Stewardship Award at NCBA's. To go back over it, it's USDA, NRCS, Cortiva, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Cargill, Sam's Club. Which is crazy. I mean, you've got it with NRCS, you've got USDA's, yeah, you've got the USDA, and then with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, you have the Department of Interior. So two federal departments, taxpayer dollars being
Hmm.
used to sponsor the Environmental Stewardship Award and Beef
Hmm.
Quality Assurance Awards.
And not to mention the checkoff.
Yeah, which who knows where that money goes, but yeah, I mean it's ridiculous that I mean, how do you even sell sponsorships to the NRCS? Hey, will you sponsor our award?
That's a great question. I think it's all through public-private partnerships with the
Well, yeah,
Leopold
it just goes to
Conservation and all
show.
that stuff. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
and that's the whole thing too about like these awards and everything. It's and the convention and they just get you there. I just feel like it's such a kind of a manipulation of producers, right? Like you come and they tell you how great you are and how it's kind of almost like a they offer a superiority, right? Like, oh, you're a bigwig if you're at the convention. And it's always been I remember guys used to take pictures of their boots when Twitter was going, there would always be jokes about the boots on the plane picture. Like they'd take a picture of their boots when they're sitting
Okay.
on the airplane on my way to CattleCon.
Oh,
But what's great
okay.
is I don't think that many people brag about that anymore because they know they're gonna they know
I
what's
don't.
coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have no idea. I did not know that.
Yeah, that was more of a Twitter thing back in the early days, I think. But it is kind of like when you get to these awards and everything, just being there. Oh, you're great, and you producers are they just stroke and
Well,
stroke and stroke your ego and make you want to come back and buy you drinks
no,
and pats
that's
on the back and all that kind of stuff. And then it's like,
that.
oh, make sure you come back next year and spend another $1,500 on a ticket or for you and your wife or whatever. It's like, and then you donate and they have auction, all that crap. It's
Well, Jim, part of the strategy to get people to buy into all of these issues and these lies and these participation trophies is to give them awards, And I don't know if you saw it or not this week, where there was a lady from the dairy industry and her local dairy cooperative was sent them out letters and stuff. And they said, you have to have these third party verifications and you have to pass these tests exactly, or you will not sell. And it's kind of the same thing of what you're talking about. If you buy into it, you get to participate. If you buying into the carbon lie, you get to participate. And then they give you these big trophies, and none of it means absolutely anything. It means nothing. It has no effect on market strategies. It has no effect on the weather. It has no effect on any of it. It's just elitist type stuff. And listen, we can get awards all day long for the rest of our lives, and it doesn't mean anything if you haven't fought for for the next generation. It doesn't mean anything. So let them have it.
Well, it just goes to show too, a lot of we've talked about how they have their kind of group of influencers that they use, right, on social media.
Mhm.
And I've talked about how like the people that do that for NCBA, and it's so performative, right?
Mhm.
And even when they're not talking about NCBA, there's such a lack of authenticity, which I think is where I think helps us some, and I think it annoys some of what we do. Because I've had people be like, "You guys even plan anything, or you just sit down and start talking?" And it's kind of like, well, yeah, we pretty much just sit down and start talking. I have a little
Yeah.
bit of an outline here, but it's like we don't, everything seems so scripted, and so it's a performance, right? And it's all just so fake,
Well, and
right,
it's
to
the
me.
thing about it is that in order to get their messaging out, they have to use me. Let's face it, me and you are old. And I want to get all these young kids back into the industry. And in order for them to align or recognize that, they have to use these younger influencers. And these younger influencers, let's face it, I don't care where you come from. These younger influencers haven't had enough time to have life experience through production agriculture. It's just they haven't had enough time, and so they have to give them. They have to say the same talking points all the time, and that you can see with these influencers across the board that though they all have the same talking points,
Yeah,
and
that have been handed to them.
they've been well, I whether they're handed to them or they've been brought up or born or indoctrinated with it through the university system. I don't know, but it's all the same stuff, and there's no individualism in it at all. And I am speaking for myself when I want my kid to think for himself. Right? That's what I want. But social media and technology is such a bondage to free thinking. I mean, it is so dangerous. But hey, they getting their message out, so I guess that's what
But
they.
I also think, I don't, you don't call it bondage. I mean, maybe to the people who are trying to be the influencers, right? Like they're
Mhm.
trying to have but if we just talk about Claire Dunn, nobody would be hearing her message without
No,
social media, and we
she's
probably
not
wouldn't
in
even.
bondage.
Yeah, right.
She's
Well,
not
same
in
with
bondage.
us. Like that's the one
No.
thing that's causing more of a problem than anything for people like NCBA is social media because people have a voice and people are able to get the truth out there. Um, One thing I'm hopefully gonna have a podcast out this week. We talked last week to a veterinarian out of South Dakota, Jim Stengel, and he is 67 years old. I'll just give the story, and hopefully people will stay tuned. I guess spoiler alert on our podcast is going to
Right.
be coming out, but Western South Dakota is filled with independent thinkers. That's for sure, and they
For
don't like
sure.
to be told what to do or what ear tags they're going to have to put in.
Hmm.
And so I put out a video this week of me talking in Wyoming where I kind of laid out the timeline for this EID deal. And I guess first of all, we get going on this EID thing and we forget like people are just like, oh, they're anti EID tags, right? Like we aren't anti EID tags. I have EID tags in my daughter's show calves. There are certain places that they're just a valuable tool all around, and everyone should be able to use them. We don't want people to not be able to use EID tags. What we're against is the government telling you what you have to do with your cattle, right? And that's what goes into Shad's property rights deal. Um, but yeah, when I looked into the EID thing, I realized that in January or in 2021, USDA told the tag manufacturers that were making metal, bangs tag, brucellosis vaccination tag, the metal ones with the USDA shield, USDA told them they were going to have to stop doing that and that the only tags that were going to be available were going to be EID tags. That was 2 years before they introduced the rule for comment. The reason they introduced the rule for comment is to get like the public perception of a rule, and how it would go over. But they had decided 2 years ago, earlier, that they weren't even going to make metal bangs tags, that the only tags available to veterinarians were going to be EID tags. And so they pushed the rule through regardless of comment or anything else. The comment period didn't even matter. It could have got 100% anti-comments and they still would have pushed it through. But to go back to Jim Stengel, he knew the rule was coming, and he knew the mandate date, and he knew his customers didn't want EID tags. And the rule is animals over 18 months that are crossing state lines have to have an EID tag. Well, that doesn't say anything about brucellosis tags, right? Or what of, the rule, the USDA never made a rule that veterinarians have to use EID tags.
Mm-hmm.
They just made that rule and then they stopped producing the metal tags. Well, Jim bought a large inventory, larger than usual, of his metal tags so that he would have them for these, because he also knew, looking at and like everybody did, that the USDA initially said that they would be funding EID tags and they would pay for them all,
Right.
which they didn't have enough money and they ran out quickly. And he was able to keep tagging because he had metal Bangs tags, and a lot of his customers wanted the metal tags. And he was visited by a USDA law enforcement, Brenda Oshbach. In do you remember what month it was?
No.
We'll get. It
It was
was,
in the fall. It was in the
yeah,
fall.
in the fall. He was visited, and he wrote an article which we're going to have out, and then we're going to have him talking about his experience and how she came to his office and told him that he is no longer. She drove from Wisconsin to South Dakota to two veterinarians' offices to tell them that they are no longer able to use metal brucellosis tags. Um, and so that it was interesting to hear that story, and we're going to have that out earlier this week. I mean, later this week. And so that just kind of goes into what were we even talking about? How I got going on that.
Well, the one thing about that is that really kind of bothered me about that whole conversation was that she said, "We've been watching you." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "What in the world?" And how that happened, the way I understood it was there was an individual at a sale barn. He had sold a heifer with a metal tag. It was a new metal tag, and somebody must have tipped APHIS off on that new metal tag at a sale barn. And so I'm like, well, here we are. Common workers at the sale barn are now working against their own people, right? That bothered me.
Well, it could have been a USDA person at the sale barn too. I mean, you never know. It could have been an employee or a vet or, who knows?
Well,
But yeah, I mean, that's, and that, going back to that convention and everything, that's kind of the most disappointing thing, is how the cattle, like going into this EID thing, it was kind of like, well, we're going to force you to do this. The vast majority of cattle producers didn't want to do it. And that was shown through the NCBA policy when they came out with that,
correct.
right? And there was this huge pushback. We're not going to use these tags on, we're not going to be forced to use the tags.
Correct.
Um,
And
and
in that comment period, Jim, 9 out of 10 of the comments on that were against the forcing of the EID.
right.
Yeah.
And so, but then it happens and they force you to do it and they force the taxpayers to pay for it. And it's all went, and now it's kind of like, well, I guess it is what it is.
Hmm.
Right. I
Yeah.
just wish people would, and I get it. Everybody's busy. And what do when your elected leaders do this, which isn't even elected leaders?
Well, I was going to say, APHIS is not elected leaders. This is
Right.
a bureaucracy that is overreaching their rulemaking authority. They don't have the authority to make these rules, and I still contend today that this is illegal rulemaking.
Yeah. And whatever happened to that? Was it Chevron or what it was called?
The
Where
Chevron
it's like,
deference.
yeah, these these bureaucratic agencies cannot make law.
Yes.
But here we have a USDA law enforcement coming and visiting a 67-year-old vet who's worked for however 40 years.
36 years.
Yeah. Taking care of his clients and taking care of the animals and doing everything he can to keep animals healthy. And he's got to deal with this lady showing up because he's using tags that he's used his whole life and that his customer wants, but aren't, and she demanded all of his forms from brucellosis, almost like she was trying to find something he wasn't doing right.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Yeah, it needs this EID thing needs to be not get just shrug your shoulders and oh well, I guess we'll see what we can do.
Well,
I
I
know
think
Harriet's
that
fought hard, but
she has.
there's so much on her plate, and when you know she's looked at all these different options of what you can do, and it's so frustrating too, even just as an American citizen, to sit back and be like, well, we have this rule that we don't agree with, and our legislatures can't even hardly figure out how to get rid of it because it's so. I mean, it goes into the checkoff too. It's like we have this law that's been passed in 1985. It's so outdated, and nobody, it's just such a bunch of BS. But no one can really figure out the best way to get around, to fix it.
Well, the problem is we got to recognize where the EID is leading us. And right now we see what's happening with the cattlemen in Canada, how harsh that EID traceability rule is. It is over the bounds, just decimating private property. We know in Ireland they did the same thing. Um, you know,
Let's get into that EID. I think let's just keep hitting that.
all right.
Every time you had it kind of memorized there, I think every time your cattle leave your place, like the EID. Oh, this is another thing I need to correct because I do say it wrong. Because I'll talk about the data on the EID tag.
Mhm.
Brett Kenzie told us the tags do not carry any data. What carries data is really the software, like that
Right,
hooks to the tag. So,
right.
every time your tag is read, all of that information goes in the software. So like where so then it gets in the software and you type in like if you're getting a brucellosis vaccination, you want that on the EID tag, I suppose. You put it in there that's what you're reading it for, and then you read it. And it puts it into the software. But yeah, so for Canada, what all do they have to do? They have to read it every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have to record this. Every animal that is born must have the EID tag. It must have the date. It must have the place. Obviously, that goes with a PIN, a premise identification number. Every time that animal is moved, they have to have a third party verify that when they move it. Let's just say the calf is born on the ranch and they take it to the sale. That has to be verified that that calf is going to the sale, including um, reading the license plates on the trailers. Then that has to be verified that the calf was dropped off at the sale and then go forth through that. Let's say a calf is born on the ranch. You keep um, that record of that, and then the calf gets hit by lightning. Well, you have to, or dies. You have to record the date of that death and have that verified, what you've done with the corpse or the body or of the dead animal. Every single move with that animal has to be traced. And I'm telling you, if you're a third party auditor or a third party verification guy, I mean, these people are going to have a heyday up there because they have to be everywhere. And it's just such an egregious overreaching of, I'm assuming Canada is no longer a free country. I mean, they're totally communist. And those poor producers up there are fighting for their lives. But this is what the EID is leading to in the United States as well. And what was it? There wasn't just Ireland, but it was the Netherlands. The Netherlands,
Meat tax. Yeah, they were or a livestock tax.
that's right. And they are using the EID, the tag itself, as the taxing unit on that. So that verifies to me what, the committee chair of the NCBA traceability committee said back in 2011 when he said we can put these EID tags in and know how many cattle you have on your ranch and where, right? Well, that's kind of the whole problem. And but that's where it's going to. And don't so we can't just sit here and say, I think you made a great point when you said, if you put it, the EID tags are for sexually intact animals 18 months or older crossing state lines. Those are the least risky disease holding animals in the United States. I mean, we send thousands and thousands and thousands of stocker cattle across the nation, literally across the nation. And that isn't part of this rule, right? So I think the key here is that they're getting on the ground level, the producer level, or the the cow calf level, the guy who actually um, has the machine that makes the baby, and getting to them first, and then they can go ahead and implement all of it across the board. So I think to watch Canada is the key right now here in the United States.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I told you so. Some
Yeah,
people say I
right.
hate to say I told you so. We don't hate to say I told you so. But it's almost like, hey, look up, this is all the stuff we've been talking about since this EID push. And then
Mhm.
all of us, have you seen the meetings, the videos of the meetings up there they're having at the
Yeah.
Livestock Associate or the local, I don't even know where it is, but it's just standing room only
Yep.
people. And they've they pulled that rule, right? Or whatever,
They froze it January
yeah.
10th because there's so much
Right. So there's so
pushback
much
on this.
pushback. They were like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
guess we're not going to do it," but everybody knows that it's still in the plans and it's
Oh,
still
hell
in the
yeah.
works. So they're still mad.
Exactly.
Um, and Alberta wants to succeed, secede.
The
Have you
seed,
seen
yeah.
that? And they're
And
all
that
cowboy
is,
guys that they show
yeah.
when they're talking about how they want to leave Canada.
Well, I mean, this is the exact model of what we were talking about, you know, 15, 18 years ago with the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. You will get on board or you will not produce. And we just talked about this lady in the dairy industry that put this incredible video out. She put an incredible video out yesterday talking about this exact thing. These are picking winners and losers. We only do that in communist countries. We are living in a communist country if we allow them to go forward with all of this, Jim. It is scary as hell. And it all filters down to who is going to have control of the land. That's what it is. Now we see these AI data centers coming in everywhere. Like, why is the AI data centers push coming so fast all of a sudden, just in the last 6 months? Like, they're building hundreds of them in Texas, out in West Texas, where we have no water, but yet they need 3 million gallons a day to run these data centers. All of this is interconnected, right? So I think that to understand, you have to understand the interwoven part of this, to understand where it leads to, right?
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
the end of the day.
Right. And to make my point again, like the EID is a tool. It's a valuable tool for ranchers to have, but it's also it's almost more valuable. And to go back to, people are like, well, what's the harm in people knowing inventory numbers and all of that? And what's the harm in the government if the USDA knows how many cattle we have or stuff like that? But it goes back to, well, NCBA is just, we just talked about at the beginning of this deal. The cattle lobbyist organization for Tyson Foods, Cargill partner. JBS is at their convention sponsoring their DC meetings. And they're partnered with USDA, NRCS, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife for their environmental stewardship award. I mean, all of these people just run in it's such a connection with the corporate agriculture
That's
and
right.
the USDA, and you want them all to have all of this information, and they're fighting and scratching and clawing for all the information they can get. And so you have to start asking yourself why. And the disease traceability thing makes zero sense when you look at this rule. And they talk about how this will make disease traceability easier. It won't. A veterinarian has to have a reader if there's an animal with a disease and you call your vet and he comes out and he doesn't have an EID reader, it's the exact same process as with a metal tag. Like he writes the number down that's on the tag and he puts it in the computer just like you would if a metal tag. That's the other thing people will say, we need a traceability. We need a national traceability system. We have a national traceability system and it works really
Absolutely.
good. And it's been
Absolutely.
tested by the USDA. They talk about, I think an animal's origin can be tracked completely from most states in like less than 30 minutes or an hour or something. I wish I had looked that up before we got on here, but yeah. And then one of the comments on my video, a guy was like, oh, I run a dairy farm and we've had EIDs forever. What's the harm in that? I'm like, have you looked at your industry? Like the stats on
Let's
their,
send him that video of this lady, right?
yeah,
Because that's where it is. And the harm is is access to marketability, right? Because it's just what you've been saying in your carbon talks. Those people, this top down model of governance, are going to come down just what they did to this lady in the dairy industry and say, hey, the source of this milk has to have an ID or we're not going to buy it. Well, what they can do is say, well, your carbon footprint is too high. You have to be, and we know how many cattle you have because of this EID and where they're located, and you have to flush some of those cattle because your carbon footprint is too high. People don't understand where this is actually headed. It's very, very dangerous.
Yeah. And I was talking, I'm doing work. I'm hopefully, we're working on the checkoff stuff and I'm trying to get a video together. But I was looking at, I typed in, and can't remember if these numbers were exact, but I typed in, like Google AI, everything you'd Google now comes up with an AI
Yeah.
thing. But I was like, what was the number of small farmers and ranchers, cattle farms and ranches in the 80s? Because the
Hmm.
beef checkoff started in 1985, and it said it was like 1.2 million, and it's been
Right.
reduced by 50%, over
50%.
50% since the 80s. So our lifetime. So
Hmm.
if you're looking at, our goal with Lonesome Lands is to kind of to ensure that independent farmers and ranchers will be able to continue into the future, right? And if you look at what has happened during our lifetime, if that was our goal, that's a complete and utter failure up to this point, right? Like we
Absolutely.
are losing farmers and ranchers and the ability to do this on our own. And so every little thing that comes down the pike, like these EID tags and things, you have to look at who's pushing for it, who wants it, and what's it going to do. In the end. And you get back into these sponsors. I would just realize there was this another thing at NCBA that I didn't read the sponsorship, which is the YCC reception. That's young cattlemen, right? It's like the young people. Is that what that YCC is? I'm pretty sure it's like the Young
Oh no,
Cattlemen's Coalition or something like that. But the sponsors are Five Rivers Cattle Feeding, the largest cattle feeder in the U.S., John Deere, Farm Credit, and Tyson, all partnered up to put on a reception for the young cattlemen at the NCBA. And people look at Five Rivers. There's a guy who went and sat down and did a podcast with Five Rivers, and oh, it's such a cool operation, and isn't this great? They can get up to 1 million cattle on feed. You know how many small independent farmer feeders that is, and that has taken over, and all of those cattle have come out of places like where I grew up, and now they're all stuck in 100,000 head feedlots, and they all have employees and their employee housing, and you know,
well, that lends itself to what I've said for a long time. These colleges and universities are no longer a place to teach you how to produce and go back to the land. They're a place to indoctrinate you and say, "Hey, we can't live without this global corporatism, and you have to be the serf to it." And that's exactly what you see right there. It's another. I don't know if I told you this or not. Young lady by the name of Blair Moreland came to my ranch and did an interview with me here a while back, a couple 3 months ago, and she wrote a story about legacy and liberty, right, and freedom, and the things I love to talk about and stand for. There was zero politics in this article that she wrote. Zero. It was just about my family and my fight for liberty. And so she goes to school at West Texas A&M, my alma mater, the place that I actually spent my money to get an education, and I helped bring two national champion horse judging teams to the forefront there. The very first year they had a horse judging team. And she wrote this article and took it back to her journalism advisor, and he loved it, right? And it's like, yeah, let's put it in the alumni book. And so they take it to the assistant dean for permission, a guy that taught me, a guy that taught me, and he wouldn't even look at it. And he says, our ideals don't align. And that struck me wrong, Jim, because if that is truly what he said, then we are just living in indoctrination camps. That only happens in communist China, where your idea or somebody that writes an article that had no politics or policy in it is denied because the subject of the article is a free thinker and doesn't align with the university ideology. This is
What's the
unbelievable to me.
university ideology that doesn't align with what you talk about? That's what
Well,
I'd like to know.
yeah, it's a great question, but it's corporatism,
Right.
right? It's corporatism. And so, and I love WT, and the greatest experiences of my life came from WT, and I still have a lot of really good friends that are involved in that. But that it didn't disappoint me. It disgusted me because that young lady did what she was asked to do and write an article, and for it to be not denied in that manner. I mean, I can see that if it was written, just slamming them, it'd be different, but it was just a story. And she got punished because I have a certain belief in independent production that doesn't align with the university system. That to me is very, very dangerous on these young people. So, to get back to what you're talking about, it's all interwoven, bro.
Yeah. And that was interesting too. Like last week, Freddie Keaton was our sponsor, and I
Yeah.
talked about how it's kind of tough. He sponsors just to see because he wants to. It's more of a support than he wants to advertise anything. So then
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I don't even know what to talk about. And then we get done. I'm like, well, I hope I did that right or whatever. And then I think about the things that Freddie Keaton would want to talk about. And Freddie, I was thinking about what Freddie would have wanted to talk about, and of course, what comes up with him, he lost a son, Caleb. Um,
So Freddie Keaton was bringing his son into the operation, and they had actually helped start him a herd of cattle, and he was building that herd as a high schooler, probably actually before that, and he was going to come back to the ranch, and there I don't know if Freddie is first or second generation. I think first generation legacy builders, but through hard work and dedication, they were going to make that happen. And then tragically, Caleb was killed in a car accident shortly after graduation. And so the the whole point here
well, what I
is
was
that
gonna say, like, we always talk about legacy as the generations, like we think about like Beatty and our kids and all that, but there's
uh-huh,
also like almost more pressure from the guys who've gone ahead, right? The people we've lost, even like my 93-year-old grandpa. You think about what he would think about what we're doing, and I'm sure Freddie is always thinking about what Caleb would think about what he's doing, and
sure,
so
sure.
there's a lot that goes into kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that's just something that crossed my mind. Like,
No,
these
it's
whole
important.
fights, and nobody fights. Freddie he's pushed on M Cool, all of those things, and you think about
Successfully.
right, yeah, and the legacy that he planned on isn't there, but he's still, he sees it or he feels it, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So,
It is a story. What we're doing here, and I know, these entrenched swamp people of corporate ag, um, they see us probably as a nemesis, but the goal here is to not lose the value of where we came from. And I think about I think about my great great grandmother who brought her boys to Colorado from Texas, and those people dug their own well and they grew their own feed, and by the 67 years later when she died, or 70 years later when she died, she had an empire, what we wouldn't call an empire today, but she had an empire for the time, right? And they did it with their own bare hands, and they laid this groundwork for us, to take what they did and go forward. And that's the key principle to what you and I are doing, is never forget those who came before. Whether it is your great great grandmother, or you're living at 100 year old legacy this year. That's something to behold, man. Or if we're talking about the people that shed blood, I can remember during World War II, my great great grandfather, he was a pinto bean farmer, a dryland pinto bean farmer. They had 3,000 acres of pinto beans. And he said during the war, while those, he was too old to go, but he said how we marketed those beans is while all these young men were fighting for our freedom and the government was putting control on prices, we were out in a field negotiating bean prices with a stick on the ground. In other words, because they had price controls, um, they negotiated a different way. And these young men were all fighting, and they were fighting for that legacy right there. And then you and I come along, and we have kids coming behind us, and those are the heirs to this freedom. That's why freedom and liberty are so important to me and so interwoven into this conversation, because these policies that we're pushing now, maybe they're supposed to be, but they are not freedom making. And that is the key. We have to, America, if you want to live in the freest country in the world, we have to be able to uphold what is guaranteed to us by the Constitution. And these policies coming through agriculture do not do that. And that's why we're here fighting.
Yeah, right on. We kind of went down a road we weren't planning on
Sorry
going
about
down,
that.
but
Yeah.
I think it's a great example because I put out all these videos. We have these videos that we'll put out on social media during the week, and people will be like, I don't want ever, I think like the NCBA will be, oh, you're just doing everything for clicks. Oh, you're just mad at everything. Oh, you're
Yeah.
just
Photo
against
ops.
everything. Like, I don't know
Right.
what Ethan Lane's telling to the cattle women group there, but I know, there's people who are trying to run us down because we are trying to change the things that they're putting in place. And the goal, we want people to be clear. The reason we are doing that is because we want people free to be able to do this,
Yes. Yes.
right? And to go back to Five Rivers Feeding, who's sponsoring how many small independent feed yards could all those cattle at that 1 million head feed yard, in all the small communities and all the main streets that dried up and feed stores that went away and all of that stuff. Like, that's why we're doing this deal. It's not
Absolutely.
because we're a paid lobbyist from DC who sits in an office all week long and then goes out and talks to the people, these cattle women who are out on the ranches doing chores and stuff, and says, oh, those Lonesome land guys, whatever he said. But just to make it clear, that's why we're doing what we're doing. So,
Yeah. And I mean, we were accused yesterday as well of being, going to DC for photo ops. And I'm like, that's the last thing I really give a crap about. I mean, we have an opportunity. This individual said, well, NCBA lobbyists have boots on the ground in DC. And that's why they matter, because they are there every day. Well, guess what? The boots on the ground in America is what counts.
yeah.
These are the people that we're putting out of business.
And they
These are
aren't
the
in
people,
DC, right? The
and they're
boots
not in
that matter.
DC. No, that's right. I always say the fruit is the result. And the fruit is, you just said it, since 1985, there's half of the people in business than was then. That is not good fruit, Jim. I
Yeah,
don't care what anybody says.
right.
That's not what we want.
And
So,
we are in this fight, and it's going to probably get way worse and continue. But it is a fight for the status quo. It is fight. John Deere and all that list, Tyson, Five Rivers Feeding, Cortiva, all those people that sponsor JBS, all those people that sponsor all that stuff, they want to continue the status quo
absolutely.
because they're employees of these corporations, and all that matters is that corporation's success, right? But to and for that to continue, it's almost like they see that we need to continue down this same path, which has been the concentration, concentration, concentration of every industry. And what we talk about here is agriculture, and that is how they see their success. And how we see your success is to keep you independent and to keep you in business and to keep you buying stuff at your local feed store and keep your small communities alive and thriving. And it's not just about the bottom line. And so at the end of the day, when we get pushback from the people whose number one goal is to continue the status quo, it's the biggest pat on the back we could ever get, I feel like.
Yeah, and the thing that people need to realize is these small towns, which we're all very proud of. I mean, I'm super proud of my small town, and you go out west into West Texas, or not even into West Texas, just go out west, and you see, there's one business for every 10 or 15 buildings on Main Street. That's the result of this. That's the fruit of this, and that's not the way it was meant to be. These communities were built upon providing for themselves and their own people and their people working for them. And that has gone away. And you talk about a million head feed yard, that would be 100,000
Hmm.
small independent feeders that would create competition. And so for everybody to think that this centralization has been good, what it has done is it's created fewer people, fewer products, less competition, more government aid. And that government aid has enabled these corporate monsters to increase their size through, because all that government aid is just pass through, right? They end up with the money and they get bigger. And where there's more money and they're bigger, there's more corruption. And it just becomes this huge cycle. So until we actually do break them up, that is the key. Use the antitrust laws to break them up, create more competition, pull back on the aid by creating better markets or creating this capitalistic return to capitalistic society. There's not going to be much change here. These in rural America, listen, we don't just have the global corporate oligarchs coming after rural America and their wealth. We have the environmental non-governmental organizations. We have the global governmental, non-governmental organizations. They're all coming after our wealth because the wealth is in the land, right? And that's what we're here to try to change the perception on. My wife is extremely intellectual, and she thinks that college, Beatty, our little boy, has to go to college. And Beatty's like, Dad, I don't want to go to college. And I said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But college isn't for everybody. And you can do what you want to do. And I'm going to support that. But college, back in the old days, we sent these kids off to college so they could return and become producers. But somewhere in the mix of this, the global hierarchy started paying these colleges and universities. And now all these kids are serfs. They're conditioned to think that they have to work for the system instead of independence. And so I hope that if there's one message we can get out is that free thinking, independent thought, and a return to what really built this nation.
Right on. Ending the status quo that we've seen for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And when you talk about small towns, Griswold, Iowa, be there
Mhm.
February 14th. Potter Cattle Bull Sale. That is my small town that I grew up in, and went to Sunday school with the Potter family since my whole life. So um, go support Griswold, Iowa. DV auction. John Shaban will be the auctioneer. Also, Shad is about to go see a lot of little small towns. You were talking about the small communities, and what's I've gotten an opportunity to drive through a lot of rural Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, South Dakota, in my lifetime, I guess. And all of those, every time I get into, people are like, "Oh, it's so boring out there," but it's like every time I get into one of them small towns, it's like I piques my interest of what it's going to look like. And Shad is on his way driving to South Dakota. He's going to see all those small towns. I mean, yeah, that's what you think of when it's like, well, there's one viable business, there's three empty buildings, right? Like you're froze again. But yeah, I was just saying, you're headed to South Dakota. You
Yes,
want to talk
sir.
about that?
Yeah, I'll be speaking at the South Dakota Stock Growers on Thursday.
He's gone again. Shad will be speaking in South Dakota Stock Growers at Black Hills Stock Show on Thursday. Luckily we got through this without all this happening in the middle of the show. But so go and check that out. He'll be in Torrington, Wyoming at some day too. Follow Lonesome Land social media. I'm posting all that stuff about Shad's where he'll be going up there and support those organizations that are supporting us. And if you want to help us keep doing what we're doing here, you can go to lonesomelands.com, click on support, go to our store, buy a ball cap, uh, subscribe to what we're doing, follow our social media, subscribe on YouTube, all of that stuff. You guys can help out also. If you want to advertise, send an email to Jim at Lonesome Lands, and we will see you next week.
Adios.